combine economic development, sustainability, and a growth paradigm that is really taking into account the limitation of natural resources. I think that is a big debate we need to have. On the question of humanity, I leave it beside, but as I said, I would like to prefer that the colleagues and the comrades start the discussion, and I would like to give first the floor to you, because you made the longest trip to get here, and I think you deserve it. And I would like, if possible, don't read the speech, just try to get into the discussion, because we have, 25 minutes. That means, let's say, 7 to 8 minutes per person if we want to react also. Please.
Thank you very much. My trip took 30 hours, and I would like to say something in a few words. I want to speak in Spanish because I think it's a sweet language, and I consider the people who translate. At the beginning of the 19th century, we had 6,000 of language, and all of them are disappearing. And we need to protect the language, because the language protects the world view and the relationship with the nature and culture. Then, for this reason, because we found a nice man who speaks good English and Spanish, I'm going to speak in Spanish. It's a way to create jobs for the present, not for the future. Bueno, hemos dicho que hay tres grandes desafíos.
There are three big challenges we have said.
Para los partidos progresistas del siglo XXI. Y ya lo hemos repetido 3 veces.
Yeah, we have repeated this 3 times. Yes.
Uno es,
First,
vivimos una crisis del capitalismo y no se puede negar.
We're living in a capitalist crisis and we cannot deny it.
El cambio climático nos afecta a todos.
Climate change is affecting all of us.
Y va más allá de las fronteras nacionales.
And it goes well beyond national borders.
Y el tercero es que nuestras democracias y los partidos progresistas están en crisis y tenemos que reinventarnos.
And the third one is that our party is in crisis and we need to reinvent ourselves.
Pero además,
Besides that,
tenemos un gran reto.
we have a big challenge.
Primero es que tenemos un avance en la ciencia y en la tecnología enorme.
We have had huge advances in science and technology.
Pero
But
tenemos un impacto fuertísimo sobre los ecosistemas del planeta.
with a strong impact on the ecosystems of the planet.
La segunda
The
es
second
que,
one is that
a pesar de haber avanzado en derechos humanos,
despite the advancements in human rights,
con 2 conflictos globales mundiales de la Primera y la Segunda Guerra Mundial,
with the 2 world conflicts in the last century, with the First and Second World War,
y cambio profundo en la geopolítica mundial,
and deep changes in geopolitical,
estamos de nuevo
we are again
peleando por derechos fundamentales.
fighting for fundamental rights.
Es decir, tenemos un tremendo avance en la ciencia y la tecnología,
That is, that although we have a big and rapid advance in science and technology,
pero en gobernanza mundial y en derechos humanos estamos como empezando en el siglo XIX.
but governing and human rights is like back in the 19th century.
Estamos viviendo la gran controversia de 1850,
We are living the big controversy of 1850.
que ya como antropóloga pues había estado
Then I, as an
superado
anthropologist, I thought we had overcome.
de que la humanidad es una sola
The humanity is one,
y las diferencias son fenotípicas.
and our differences are only phenotypical.
Y nuevamente, líderes mundiales,
And that once again, world leaders
basándose en una ideología racista,
having racist ideologies,
tenemos que explicarles que todos somos Homo sapiens sapiens.
we have to explain to them that we are all Homo sapiens.
Y eso es muy triste.
And that's very sad.
Incluso en las universidades norteamericanas
Even in North American universities,
se está negando la evolución.
evolution is being denied or, debunked.
Lo segundo es que el mundo,
The second thing is that the world,
que es una controversia también del siglo XIX,
which is another controversy of the 19th century,
el mundo es diverso, culturalmente diverso,
the world is culturally diverse,
y que la globalización no nos lleva
And globalization will not take us
a un solo tipo de sociedad.
to only one kind of society.
Y esa es una gran reivindicación de la humanidad
And that's a great reivindication of humanity
y por los partidos socialistas y la socialdemocracia,
and for the Socialist Party and social democracy.
que debemos proteger la diversidad cultural.
We must protect cultural diversity.
Y segundo,
And second,
tercero digo,
third,
es que esa diversidad cultural
that cultural diversity
es lo que nos ha permitido en el mundo que ciertos ecosistemas sobrevivan.
it has allowed us for the world ecosystems to survive, our cultural diversity.
Caso concreto es la Amazonía.
A concrete case is the Amazon forest
Exactly.
right now,
Y todo el Caribe latinoamericano,
and all Central America and the Caribbean,
ajá, que preserva todavía ecosistemas puros.
that is still preserving natural ecosystems.
Entonces,
So,
nuestro gran reto,
our big challenge,
y que yo quiero discutir con el documento de la resolución,
and I want to discuss this with the resolution document,
Cohesion and Social Cohesion and Progress,
Social Cohesion and Progress, yes.
que es el tema de la conferencia, es si realmente
If really
el capitalismo puede transformarse en un sistema más justo
if really capitalism can be turned into a more just system
y menos depredador
and less predatory
de los recursos del planeta
of the planet's resources
ante el avance con la velocidad que tiene el desarrollo tecnológico. Yo
with
lo
the
dudo.
advancements, with the rapid advancements of technology.
Sí, yo lo dudo.
I doubt it.
Y la otra pregunta que tengo es, ¿será que la única forma de crear esa cohesión social, que es integridad, es comunidad?
My other question is, sorry,
Si crear la cohesión social, que es comunidad, es crear comunidad,
if creating community and social cohesion,
crecimiento económico y bienestar,
economical growth and well-being,
es manteniendo el mercado
the only way to build that is keeping the market
como la alternativa
as an alternative
para estimular la innovación y la
Just-
competitividad
to stimulate innovation and competition
y avanzar hacia un mundo de mayores niveles de bienestar.
and advance to a bigger a world with more well-being, with higher levels of well-being.
Y
Is
ahora
that the only way?
mi posición es como
My
país,
position now is,
de país latinoamericano,
as a Latin American country,
y le pregunto a los africanos
I
y a los
asked the
asiáticos,
Africans, Asian countries,
es decir, que hemos aportado desde siglos
that which I mean, among us and among the African and Asian countries, we have provided for centuries
commodities,
commodities,
nuestro territorio
our land, territories,
y mano de obra barata.
and workforce, cheap workforce.
¿Cuál es nuestro papel
What is our role
si queremos reinventar la economía?
if we want to reinvent the economy?
Yo diría que esas son mis preguntas.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Gracias, Margarita. Es un placer escucharte. Thank you, Margarita. I think it's important you raised the question of how to build communities, because you can translate it also how to build societies. And this brings us to the question, which is before having a prospect of social cohesion as a political concept, how to build societies which are cohesive and inclusive, which is a big debate, what is necessary to frame this policy making. And indeed, well, also I think it is very helpful that you look back in terms of to find answers for the future, also to understand what we have to learn from the past, what came out of the civilizations, and to make a link, not to refer to the past, but to make a link. Now we move from Central America to what we call in Europe, in Western Europe where we live, to the Eastern Partnership and Eastern Neighborhood. Dimitri, we had a great conference in Tbilisi, and I think it is, well, but really impressive, the political efforts you made with the Dream Party. First of all, we were impressed that the name of the party is Dream Party, because sometimes, well, Social Democrats rather have the impression that it's a nightmare, what we live and not a dream, and therefore I find it very courageous that you go for a Dream Party. So give us, please, answers on this question. Where do you see the prospect of decent work in your country and in your region? And also the question of community building or societal building, how to build societies which are socially cohesive and inclusive.
Thank you very much. I will probably brief, but just very briefly describe the situation in Georgia in this regard. So in my understanding, decent job, growth, and human development should be discussed jointly. Otherwise, we in our country had a period of the growth, but without the decent jobs and human development. And this is quite good example of how this neoliberal ideology could work in a practical countries, especially with some kind of mentality of post-Soviet state, where everything socially oriented could be considered as a going back to the Soviet past, because actually it was not practically social welfare system, even though it has a strong social mechanism of this, securing the people's social rights, but in the same time it was like a country of authoritarian regime with a very strong limitation of the human rights. So in these regards, we had a kind of big rooted problem in our Georgian society, discussing the issues of social-oriented market economics that to be linked with the Soviet past. And of course, it was the first 2 decades of development of the Georgia during the post-Soviet time was very much dominated again by the neoliberal ideas, thinking that every deregulation process of the market, every privatization and other aspects of the neoliberal ideas could cause the very quick, rapid economic growth of the country. And in reality, it caused, in numbers, in GDP, we had a period of time when we had the growth of the 7, 8, sometimes 10%, but unfortunately, it didn't create additional jobs. We even, during the period of the deregulation in the 2000s, in Georgia, number of unemployment was increased, even though there was a fully unregulated labor market, and all the institutions protecting the labor rights were abolished. But anyway, there was an increase of unemployment, and we saw that despite the significant number of growth in economies, there was no the development of the, there was not inclusiveness, and not all the parts of the Georgian society was benefiting from the growth. So at the moment, we from Georgian dream, in Georgian way, the Georgian dream means, of course, the fight and struggle for the democracy, and it was started as a big movement in the beginning, but now it's a political force with central left orientation, I would say. Of course, we still have some influence of some Georgian traditional conservatives inside of our movement and our party. Of course, we still have some kind of elements of liberal ideas, but inside of our party, there's a strong movement of trying to make changes of the Georgian social system in a more inclusive way. And in this regard, we have the significant changes, I would say, since the Georgian dream is in the power, and one of them was a shift from the very commercial healthcare system into the universal healthcare system, which make the healthcare affordable for everyone. And even now we are still increasing the budget of our healthcare expenses, and state is paying. I mean, it's one of the biggest part of their Georgian budget, but it was necessary in order to at least provide some kind of basic needs of the social needs of the Georgian society. But at the same time, we started working on improving the labor rights, and we had several ways of improving some standards in Georgian legislation. It was 2013 when we it was the first attempt to start changes in our legislation. The second time it was like more institutionalization of the monitoring mechanism, like creating this small but still labor inspections. And now we are working in a very significant shift, let's say, because in Georgia, in parliament, we already prepared a huge reform package for transforming Georgian labor legislation in a more adequate and closer to the European standards legislation, with very strong and clear mechanism of providing enforcement mechanism of that law. I would not speak in details of the changes, but I would just say several things what we're gonna touch. It will be, of course, these changes has a significant component of the protecting the gender right in the labor relations, which needs a special attention in our case as well. So one of the main shift is increasing the expenses of the state on covering the maternity leave, let's say, of course, with the elements first time in Georgian legislation to have this paternity leave process, and stimulating fathers also to use this opportunity to be with their children. At the same time, we're improving the standards of the eliminating discrimination, Georgian legislation. We are going to regulate the working time and holidays and rest time, in which is not so much regulated, and of course there is no still a mechanism to enforce what is already in the legislation. And creating the package also includes the creation of the strong labor inspection mechanism, which in our understanding will have the strong mandate in order to control not only occupational safety, which is already in their mandate, but also to control and to monitor the process of protecting the labor rights in the enterprises and in the companies and in the public sector as well. So, but what's this one of the main, I would say, the main priority at the moment for Georgia? We see that everything is very important. Of course, all the legislation is important, but we need some kind of mental shift as well. And of course, these decades of the neoliberal dominant philosophy in our country changed some kind of mentality. And the construction of the institutions also changed the people's mind, and we need some kind of more motivation, more involvement of the state in the education system. And now we just adopted a law which limits every next government to spend less than 6% of the GDP in education. This is where we see that the panacea of all problems will come up. Of course, we can adopt the great labor code, but without education, we could not fully enforce this labor code, because there's the problem from the employer side. Of course, they don't really want to implement, to enforce the law which was adopted, and this is because of lack of education, let's say. And at the same time, there is a resistance from the employers not to use these legal mechanisms to support themselves in their daily life. So education is one of the main priority where we expect the real changes of the social transformation of our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dimitri, because I think it's a good example also to understand what is the particular situation of a post-Soviet country. First of all, well, for sure, the ideological victory of neoliberalism against something that everything what was social was considered being socialist in Soviet sense. And in the other side, the question what you call for also is the cultural issue. That means to change mentalities. Anna, I could ask you as a Georgian, but you all are already subject of cultural change and mentality change, but I think there's something which really makes a difference. I will not ask you anything on Georgia, because you're not here as Georgian, which you are, which is important to be as Secretary General of USI, but USI is the worldwide youth organization of the socialist and social democratic family, and so far it's a global perspective that you could bring in. And secondly, all over the day we have heard how important is youth and how important is the perception that young people have of the future. So how do you see the question of educational system? Does it prepare you? Do you think that investment in education, social healthcare services and everything is a preparation also to see for you where is the future, where could be, how could you also not only benefit as a consumer of the technological advancement, but really also to see what can be the future perspective of the societies in which you and your comrades and friends and fellows will live in the next 20 or 30 years? Easy question.
But first I will start what you asked at the beginning. What is a decent work? Because it reminded me something very interesting. UC, as you mentioned, is a global organization, so we are part of UNMGCY, that is the UN major group for children and youth, and we are coordinating SDG 8, that is exactly decent work. And as a UC, we were in the room together with a lot of people from different countries of the UN, and exactly that was the question someone raised: what is decent work? And in my disappointment, a lot of young people started to talk about that decent work for them means like the professions like to be a lawyer or to be a doctor or to be an engineer. But foremost, for us as a socialist, and we are discussing it in UC a lot, the future of work and what decent work means, is it's foremost the protections, the social protections that the workers should have. and stability, the sense of stability, the sense of self-development, because without that, we don't see any future. And I see in the discussions we are having right now in UC, because we started to launch a global campaign on decent work. It's going to be our upcoming year's main focus, and we are going to different regions. We have committee structures, so we are trying to listen to our members from different committees, what the challenges they are facing. And this is quite the same challenges young people are saving. Insecurities, like the job market is so insecure, especially now in so-called gig economy. We are forced to have this so-called zero-hour contract, where it's very flexible for employer, but very precarious for employees, that has no social protection, no rights. When you are, for example, having a lot of jobs, and during the day you can have 3-5 jobs. One can be like being a Uber Eats driver, and then you fall out from the bicycle, and then no one knows what happens, because there is no protection, there is no contract. So this is the biggest challenge we are discussing right now in UC, in our meetings, and this is something that we want to come up with the campaign to organize young people globally, and to come up with very clear messages what we want as a young people for the decent work. But to go back also to your question, of course, education matters, because it's chain. We can't discuss decent work, especially in young people, without discussing the accessible education, without discussing the quality education. So of course everything is very much interlinked to each other. And also very important message I wanted to say, we are talking a lot about the creation of the jobs. There was a lot of speakers and panels about it, and yes, it's important, but I think we should mostly focus the quality of the jobs, because it doesn't mean that yes, we as young people might find some job, but it doesn't mean that this job will give us the opportunity to exist and opportunity to self-develop or even survive. This is like the biggest question that young people all over the world are facing.
Thank you very much. And well, I think for the decent work campaign you want to run, we can come together also for Solidar, because then we have started, we're in 2005, together with the ITUC, the International Trade Union Confederation, and the European Trade Union Confederation, we launched this campaign, Decent Work for a Decent Life, a global commitment for all. And if the question, what is decent work? It's 4 strategic objectives. Access to freely chosen employment. Number 1, you said it, and not precarious work or informal economy. Fundamental principle and rights at work and international labor standards. There's a reference to the ILO. 3rd is social protection and social security. And 4th is social dialogue. And I think it's perhaps not something only to be considered, it's from the past, because it's from the future, and we have to define how this can be organized in future forms of employment. Thank you for your contribution. Budiman. We are very happy that you joined us, because we were afraid that you may not make it, and then you entered the room and said, great, he's here. So Budiman, I'm happy that to have with you also somebody from the region, as a European I can say this, from the region, from neighborhood country, from Indonesia, on this question. Give us your perspective from the Indonesian point of view and from your party's point of view.
Yeah, actually, the primary revolution that we should tackle as a social democrat or as a socialist is not the 4th industrial revolution, but revolutionizing ourselves in viewing the question of job. Instead of talking about the decent work, maybe we have to anticipate the advancement of science, technology, and civilization on the jobless future. That's the issue that unfortunately very few social democrats tackle these issues. And actually, last week there is a World Congress of the Universal Basic Income in Hyderabad, India. Unfortunately, I couldn't come because there is something political things that I have to tackle in Indonesia. That we have to focus, because theoretically speaking, conceptually speaking, we have to view the advancement of technology and science as a consequence of the capitalism, as a consequence of the learning process as human being. As a social democrat, we treat the human being as central of everything, and the human being itself is subject, learning subjects. And I would like to open my presentation by quoting the declaration, the very bold declaration of the techno-libertarians community that we have to face as a socialist. The declaration is very, 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 very bold. Governments of the industrial world, you very giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mine. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. A declaration of the independence of cyberspace. This is a challenge. This is bold statement by the techno-libertarians movement that we have to tackle. Otherwise, we are backing at the wrong tree. We are no longer in the first industrial revolution when the second international facing the steam powered capitalism, or the third international promoting electricity powered socialism, just like what Lenin said, socialism is Soviet plus electricity. We are no longer in the classical neoliberalism tenets based on the digital revolution. We are beyond that. We are, as a socialist, as a social democrat, as a progressive, it's not enough in anticipating the current challenge. Even we have to imagine the next challenge. Not only imagining, not only crafting the new technology, tackling the current problem, but also anticipating and imagining even the problem in the near future, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, that beyond our wildest imagination as a classical socialist. Instead of talking about the social issue from the perspective of social approach, we have to think more scientifically. Maybe if we have to quote the old guardian of socialism, we have to learn more from angles when we focus on the issue of the dialectic of nature, dialectic of science, dialectic of technology, and the relationship with the progress of society. Recently, I read a lot about it by Elon Musk. He quotes Bakunin. He quotes, I know, some anarchists. He is envisioning the anarchic society without analog institutions, based only on the digital and independent cyberspace. That's very important. We don't have much time. We have to tackle the problem in 5 years, and that's why I think the strategy that social democrats should have in this 21st century is first combining three things, three revolutionaries. Those who want to make our society smart, educators, progressive politicians, cooperatives, activists, okay? And they have to talk with those who want to make our technological tools smart. AI expert, blockchain expert, 3D printing expert, machine learning expert that's supposed to have a progressive political point of view. And talking with those who want to make our biological body smart, progressive neuroscientists, socialist gene editors, socialist expert of brain-machine interface. That's the things that socialists should tackle, because the tech giants in Silicon Valley, now working on it very seriously. What we are doing in Indonesia, what we are working in Indonesia is, instead of socialist Silicon Valley, we are creating Silicon Villages, community-based socio-techno innovation, village-based socio-techno innovation, instead of corporate-based socio-techno innovation just like in Silicon Valley, or state-based socio-techno innovation just like in China. We have to propose socio-techno village, Silicon Village based on the socio-technological innovation. I think that's the proposal that I should give to you from Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that is well, excellent, and I don't think that's a competition between the old school and new school, because it also social democracy always had this approach of empowerment. And empowerment and education is the first step. And the second, if we want to structure, if we want to accompany and make policies, we first of all need an understanding. And indeed, what sometimes is lacking is that technological developments are so fast that we are running behind like chicken, because it is not our culture. First of all, it is not our daily work. It is not our daily concern, but I think it's important what you say. We need also in the social democratic family, and therefore FEPS is important. We need really think tanks and not only platforms for meeting and consideration. We need these think tanks to allow social democrat activists, party leaders, and also activists on the ground to have an understanding where do we go for. Because our friend from Argentina said it, there is an ideological battle. And behind this sweet sound of silence, which is not silence, it is smart, it is autonomous driving and so on and so on, at least there is a risk of losing autonomy and self-determination, which is a political issue for emancipation. And when we say we are about, as social democrats, to lose an ideological battle, it is much more, because if we discuss the question on how to build communities and how to build societies, if we do not have empowered citizens, and not only voters, but citizens, this is the question of the battle on the minds, and to have the understanding how can we gain again and reappropriate the domination of the technology and not run behind the technology. This is what I hear from you, and I think this is indeed, in a way, going through the continents and going through the generations, this is something which could be a very strong message. The concept of what is social cohesion, what is also social protection, what is inclusion, we know. Somebody said, where is the question, the notion of progress? Social democrats stand for progress. Yeah, but is this new technology only progress? That is a big debate, a societal debate. Perhaps it could be, Konstantin, an idea for future, next year or other conference, really to get an appropriation of what is behind this question of societal progress and technological progress, how to combine it. And Maria, I think that could be also good for the future work program of FEPS in the next years to come. That could be really a big challenge, because this is the question of the future, not only of Europe, of Asia, of Latin America, Central America, or wheresoever. It is very much the question of where this world will go, and it is very much a question also of the humanity. That means how will we be victims and only follow, in the sense of, sorry, some may remind Big Brother, there was something at the time on control. We may remind Orwell, have not forgotten it, but the times are changing, but the question is still the same. And therefore I think if we want to discuss on progress and give this definition and re-appropriate for us what is really happening in our societies, what is happening technologically and societally and socially, I think this is the way to get forward, and that social democracy can again regain the leadership. I think that we have, unfortunately, I would say, to close the debate here, because we will not postpone again the discussion on the gender working group. They have been victims and postponed until now. And I really, first of all, I would like you to give a hand and to applaud the panel for the short and sharp contribution. And then secondly, I said self-control is important. So please, I want everybody to continue now with the gender working group and not to run out and saying this is only for those who are interested in it. It concerns us all, as it concerns also the technological issue. So please stand and let's continue with the program.
Thank you very much, Connie. And thank you very much to all of you on the panel. It was really enlightening. So, I think, okay, so it's due to the delay which we had at the the working group on gender is now a little bit delayed, not only a little bit, but at the end, I think it was really a kind of a master plan to have during our today sessions wake-up calls. Wake-up call by John Eng, the chairwoman of the DAP Women's Wing, and during the morning we had another wake-up call today afternoon by Ruth, and now before we close, we have another wake-up call, a wake-up call that if we speak about progressive politics, we have to speak first of all about gender equality. So therefore, please, Bahir, co-chair of the Gender Working Group of the Progressive Alliance, please come on the stage and call your panelists.
Thank you. Antonia from New Zealand and from Philippines. Rafaela. Yes. Sorry, but hi. Okay, it was rich information, even speaking about different issues during the sessions. We have another previous two speeches, they left already, but they were supposed to be on the gender working group. But also we listened to them and they were very rich information and high appreciated from what they are doing in their countries. I am part of the gender committee of the Progressive Alliance. We established this gender committee since 2015. And of course, I will not speak a lot about the gender committee, but the main objective for us as a Progressive Alliance within the Gender Committee, it's a struggle against discrimination of women in the heart of our work and continuous with all our meetings, and also a struggle for equal rights in participation, the opportunities, and of course at the end for the social democracy. We adopt an action plan as a gender committee, including from as a globally issues for all the countries, speaking about campaigns, different campaigns on gender-based violence, sexual, productive health, and also about education, about the unemployment, that it's taking part everywhere within all the countries globally. Also, we, as the gender committee within the Progressive Alliance, also we aware about the needs of to be closer with the women's movement. And each also meeting, each conference, there is a speaking about the gender issues from different countries that would increase our knowledge to learn from each other and also to add within how we continue our struggle together as a woman. And we have today, I will give the floor to Antonia from New Zealand, from the Labour Party, to give us an idea about what's going on there. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. I guess my sort of approach to today was, you know, we heard a lot about some of the problems and really quite well articulating, I think, the problems that we face, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, with women's rights and women in politics in our region and in the globe as well. And I guess what I was going to provide was perhaps some solutions. You know, we're very good at describing and identifying what our problems are, but not always in discussing the solutions or where we might have had some successes. So I guess that's really where I wanted to sort of pitch my contribution to this panel today. Now, Howard and I think Howard has had to run back off to his state, but we're having quite a almost cathartic conversation over lunch yesterday about some of the issues that arise from being in government. Of course, unfortunately not a problem all of us share, but there are some challenges, and we've heard from our Malaysian comrades during the day today in particular about what some of those are, and they are certainly real challenges. Of course, being in government does mean that you do finally get to get things done, and particularly in this space, I think has been one that we've been really focusing on with Jacinda Ardern and her leadership in New Zealand. And so there are sort of two areas that I just quickly wanted to highlight that we've been able to make some real progress in over the last couple of years since we won government at the end of 2017. Those being firstly women's access to resources, particularly financial resources in New Zealand, and secondly improving and progressing the place of women in public life and in governance in the country. And I think, you know, women having access to particularly financial resources is such a crucial thing when it comes to removing or reducing that inequality gap that we see within our countries, ensuring that women have access to decent paid work, and they're paid fairly and not paid less for doing a job that's of the same value as a job that a man might do. And that's something that our government has really taken quite seriously. And so a real focus has been on implementing and expanding pay equity settlements in New Zealand. So a couple of years ago, under the previous government, but then expanded under Jacinda's leadership, was putting in place a framework for ensuring that women, workers who do jobs that are female dominated, that's primarily women who do these professions, aren't being paid less because it's a profession that's dominated by women. One really big case in New Zealand was the case of Christine Bartlett. She was an aged care worker. She took care of our elderly in a rest home in New Zealand. And she was being paid a little above the minimum wage for really hard, really back-breaking work. She'd go to work every day and it's really physical, it's tough mentally and emotionally. She's caring for these older people who might have, not quite all their marbles. They might be a bit difficult or a bit grumpy because, life can be a little bit hard maybe when you're in a rest home. But they were being paid next to nothing and were able to prove in court that was because this was a caring profession that's primarily dominated by women. And so as a result of that, 55,000 workers in New Zealand were able to achieve an increase in pay, some of up to 50% of their hourly wage, by pegging their salaries or their wages to a comparable male-dominated profession and showing that they were reasonably similar in regards to the amount of qualifications or training or the difficulty of the job. So that's one thing that our government's been working on and expanding that, so including mental health care workers in that settlement case that the previous government neglected to include. The other one is also, we know that women are much more likely to be in work that's paid at or around the minimum wage. And so that's something that we've been really focusing on as well, is that when you raise minimum wages in your countries, we know that means women are likely to see quite a bump in their pay as well. And that sort of extends to something that's a really sort of key piece of legislation that our government's working on at the moment, which is fair pay agreements. These are quite similar to the model that they use in Australia, which is industry standard agreements, where entire industries, so hospitality or retail, will have standard agreements that ensure a minimum standard of pay and conditions across a whole industry. Of course, these industries are ones that are much more likely to be dominated by women, further being able to increase the access for women to financial resources in New Zealand. And the second one was that I wanted to talk about was improving the place and access to women, for women in public life and governance. There was a photo that I sent through that I was hoping we might be able to put up on the TV screens. It was quite a cute photo. It was our Speaker, Trevor Mallard, sitting in the House of Representatives in New Zealand, in the Speaker's chair, in his full robe and Speaker get-up, and he was holding a little baby Tutenakai. You might have seen it, yeah. So he's sitting in the Speaker's chair in his full Speaker's robes, and he's got the baby and the little bottle in the baby's mouth. And of course, this isn't actually the first time that we saw this in the Parliament in this term. Jacinda's baby Neve got some similar treatment, being held by the Speaker while she answered questions in question time to, allow her the space to be the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And several other female MPs in the country have been able to bring their children into the House of Representatives, and they've received similar VIP treatment. So I'll have to post that one on social media or something so that those of you who haven't seen that, it's quite a powerful image, I think, in terms of women and their place in public life and in governance. But something that's been sort of a key policy has been ensuring that we have a target of 50% women on state sector boards. So currently, under the leadership of our State Services Minister, we have 47.4% of all state sector board members women in New Zealand, which isn't quite 50, but it's pretty damn close. And we also now, for the first time in the history of our country, have more than 50% women state sector chief executives, which I think is another real achievement. I think finally, you know, a part of ensuring that women have a place in a visible place in public life and in governance in a country is ensuring that our own organisations and institutions are holding ourselves to account for that as well. And something that I was really pleased to hear about was that there was going to be an effort made within our own Progressive Alliance to ensure that the board was made up of 50% women at the next meeting in Stockholm later this year. I think that's so important, and that's something that we've been working on within the party ourselves. Over the last couple of years, and particularly since we've been in government, there's been a real push to ensure that all of our internal party organisations have 50% women within our own structures. Our local electorate committees must now have their executive teams made up of 50% women. And we've seen that flow through into the way that we think about women within our party when we're selecting candidates for electorates or candidates for the list, and right through to, you know, it being normal and accepted that we would have a 38-year-old woman selected to be Prime Minister 7 weeks before an election. So I think it's really important that we're striving to achieve those, and actually quotas is a really good way of doing that. Our experience certainly, and I don't think that anyone here in this room could disagree, that when you make the space for women, there are competent, capable women who will come forward to fill those places. And I think quotas are a really effective way of ensuring that there is the space for women to be identified and to come forward and to take up those places. So I know we're short on time, so I'll stop there. But thank you very much for hanging around to talk about the Gender Working Group. And I'll pass over to Rafaela.
Thank you. Thank you, and I think it's the most important things that empowering women and men, also within economic development, it will increase the social development in the society everywhere. And now we'll listen to Rafaela. She will speak about space, safe space for women and girls in Philippines. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Bahia, and of course to my batchmate in UC, Antonia. Comrades, I share with you our story also in the Philippines. Of course, you're familiar with our president, and if there's something that our current president reminds us, and well, along with his other authoritarian classmates, is that historically, tyrants have been afraid of women. Because women, once they recognize that they have power and they have a voice, tend to destabilize the status quo. Women, when they start to recognize the small boxes that they're asked to fit inside in the various spaces that they occupy, and when they refuse to fit in these boxes, tend to rock the systems in the private sphere, in their family life, in the workplace, and even in national and international spaces. We're of course inspired by Jacinda, who's making a splash, showing us that another system and another kind of leadership is possible. An alternative to the rise of the populist and tyrants that we see in the Philippines and in many other countries. It is this fear of empowered women that also push them to be unkind and even cruel to women. We have our president again consistently making jokes about rape in his campaign trail. Wolf whistling, woman journalist, and of course, telling soldiers that they can shoot women in their private parts. As if well, these remarks by the most powerful person in the country serve to normalize further violence against women, as if we don't have enough of it. A recent survey we did in one of the biggest cities in the country, Quezon City, showed that 3 out of 5 Filipino women experience sexual harassment at least once in their life. 88% of which are 18 to 24, so very young women experiencing sexual harassment. Majority of which they get from strangers, outside in public spaces. In fact, 70% of the sexual harassment experience that they have happen in broad daylight, again in public spaces, most of which are underreported. 3 out of 5, well, equally alarming is that 3 out of 5 men surveyed admit to doing some forms of sexual harassment. In a focus group discussion done as well, it's really sad that because even with this figure, it is still the women who feel like it's their fault when they are subjected to sexual harassments. It is with this context that we're proud to report to you that through the leadership of our party chairperson, that we were able to pass a safe spaces law just this July. This safe spaces law expands the protection that women have in three particular ways. First, it expands where sexual harassment happens. Before the law was passed, sexual harassment was only covered in private spaces and workplaces. Now we expand sexual harassment, and we recognize that they too happen in public spaces. We also expand the definition of sexual harassment, covering by identifying other acts as equally important and equally offensive to women. Catcalling and wolf whistling, for instance, is now considered under the law as offensive and can be penalized either through arresto menor and also can be fined. We are of course reminded that catcalling and wolf whistling is not a form of compliment. It is offensive to us women, and putting that in the law is an important achievement. And of course, we also expand sexual harassment by identifying who can be perpetrators of this. Before the law, it was only considered that people who are in power in workplaces can be perpetrators of sexual harassment. Now we also cover peer-to-peer sexual harassment. So again, the passage of the law is an important achievement as far as pushing forward safe spaces within the country. Let me end my sharing by sharing with you, I suppose, a story. Being a commuter in Manila, I live in the metro of the Philippines, and I'm a commuter. I go to take the train most often than not, since even when I was still a student. In the Philippines, you have a train system where you have a particular section that is only for women. So designated for women, recognizing that you have to have a safe space where it's a women's only. And I wonder, is that really what we mean by safe spaces? We exclude women so we protect them from danger that they may experience while commuting. We beg to differ. When we say safe spaces, that means we have to expand it to all spaces that we are part of, from the public spaces, from commuting, and not again being subjected to these kinds of harassments on a day-to-day basis. So the challenge for us is again to expand these spaces and to make sure that we expand it to women and to, of course, to our friends also in the LGBT community, and pass further legislations to ensure that we are protected and we push for women's rights in our countries.
Thank you. And I will not speak long because I know that and we don't have time for discussion, of course, but I want to mention about in all the world about the challenges, what we are facing as a woman. Me as a Arab woman, Palestinian woman, also we are facing a lot of problems. Especially we are also living under occupation, but also within the social rights, as we don't have an equal rights. In all the world, within the government also, that the system of education, we have to work on it everywhere, about to work with boys and girls, not just as a woman, because gender, it's not related for women, for men and women, and we hope next year or for the future, that the men, they will share us also the panel and speak about gender equality. And we have to continue for struggle for our equal rights. But I think it's not easy, it's very difficult, especially where we are living in different countries. We have Europe countries different than the Arab countries, different than the Philippines, the New Zealand. It's need an action plan for each country and support each other, that and hope also to give the women, because the majority who's suffering in all the world, the women, the majority with the unemployment, they are women. If we empower women economy, that we could help and improve the situation within the social rights. We could advocate on the government to have to get our rights, especially, for example, in Arab countries, just we have Tunis that they have law for women, but in the other Arab countries, we don't have, because it's related to the religious. And this is also the big challenge for us as an Arab country. The other issues, the poverty, the wars, the conflict, and we don't have security. Philippines, they don't have, feel safe. Me, as a woman, I can't go in the night, because not like in Europe, in Germany or or Sweden, alone, because I will go, if I will go around 12 o'clock in the night, I don't feel safe, not because of the political situation, also because of the mentality of men where we are living, and the mentality of the women, how they are thinking about women. So we have to work again and again together, and to continue with the Progressive Alliance within their main objective on gender issues. And we hope that will expand the gender committee to include men with us, and to advocate together in different countries that will support each other to have our rights. Thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch together, and thank you.
You start.
Comrades, it has been a very long day, but we are very thankful for your hard work and your inputs and your long travels, even from Asia coming here to be able to share with us not only what happened in the anniversary yesterday, but what we have been talking today. We have been talking about progress. To me, progress is action for gender equality. To me, progress is action for decent work. To me, action for human rights and democracy. To me, progress is action to build alternatives to the neoliberal economic order. To me, progress is our alternative to inequality. And with that, those are all your inputs for today. And we shall be sending to you all these very important inputs that all of the speakers have contributed today. But I would also like to specially thank our host and, of course, the sister parties coming from Europe, from Latin America, from the Middle East who have come here. We are thanking the representatives from the youth movement in our family. We are thanking, of course, our guests who make this event not only a conference to be remembered, but a conference that lays out the action for the future. We will build a future that is transnational. We will build a future that is future-oriented and innovative. We will build a future that will foster social cohesion and progress. Thank you very much, comrades. and to the Progressive Alliance. We will see you again in the next fruitful meetings to come.
Also from my side, very briefly, and actually I have 2 points. Of course, I have to thank to all who have contributed to this conference and to this meeting today. And of course, many, many thanks to all who helped to make this meeting happen. And maybe you allow me also to share something from a very personal perspective. I'm really delighted by these meetings because first I learn a lot. Second, because it is also a good place to network and to prepare future cooperation. And that's actually the main point for me from my perspective, because we are able to create we were able to create and to keep trust in our network. And this is something, this trust is one of the highest goods in politics. This is, all of you know this as politicians. And once again, in particular for this trust, I really want to thank you. And that now a technical note. 7 o'clock downstairs, the bus or the walking group, not a working group, a walking group to the reception, 7 o'clock. But now, Johan.
Thank you, Konstantin, and thank you all of us for this wonderful meeting. I just want to share a few remarks and reflections. It is strange how we are living in different countries, different regions, and different circumstances, and obstacles that we face, they are also partly different. But in somehow they bottom down to inequality, how we are fighting the neoliberal agenda, and how the populist and the far right have used inequality to mobilize people in order to push for their authoritarian agenda in even more of neoliberalism in that sort of sense. And we as progressives and social democrats, we have shown all around the world, and you are showing here today in Malaysia, how you can actually achieve sustainable growth, how you can tackle climate change, and how you can put forward a social progress, creation of welfare states, healthcare systems, educations, and so on. So we really have the solutions, and sometimes the people isn't with us, but as the Secretary General said, if you have the ideas, the right moment will come. And what we're doing here in these gatherings is that we're building up this moment, because we're finding the strength in each other, and we are mobilizing each other, and we're training each other, and we're having this exchange of ideas. And if you're looking at the future issues, I mean, the hardcore of social democracy is, as the Secretary General said, it's about jobs creation. And it's about the future of work, it's about digitalization, it's about tackling climate change, and to do it in a shared perspective of prosperity in that sort of sense. So we know that we hold the future in our hands, because we know that we have the ideas that will be able to govern for the many and not the few. And we hope that a lot of you will join us in Stockholm, because then we, together with our leaders in a global gathering, will be able to show the world this and show that there is a resistance. There is those who are willing to fight this authoritarian trend, this Trumpism and this tweeting of austerity policies and whatever it is that they're putting up in front of us. But we know that we are strong together, and we have shown that today, and we will continue to do so. And I think that Ruth made a very important point when she said that those who should care most, or at least empower women the most, that is actually the men. So I'm very happy that we are taking that step as a progressive movement together as well. We as a party in Sweden back in the 90s decided to have split lists between men and women. We are having a gender equal government, and we're having a feminist foreign policy. And we can see that empowerment of women have advanced society as well. But we also see that we have to empower men in order to take the step of being really gender equal and also being feminist. So that, I think, is the step that we need to take as men, and I'm very proud to see that that is the direction that the Progressive Alliance is also moving to in that sort of sense. Let me close by again thanking our host. It's been wonderful, and we are so impressed by your progress and your commitment and the generosity by you hosted us. Let me thank Chris for the excellent sharing and really the development of the Social Democratic Network in Asia. And Konstantin for being our steady leader in turbulent times. of this achievement of, developing the Progressive Alliance, which we jointly set down many years ago, and said this is the next step for our progressive family to take, and which has now developed us to this, and we're ready to go even forward in the sense of ensuring that we are a global movement to be counted on. So thank you very much for this, and all very welcome to Stockholm.
The meeting is closed.
See you at 7.
Sorry?
We can do it. We can do it, yeah.